Well, good morning, good afternoon to all of you. Welcome to our webinar. The title of this session is What Operators and Educators Need to Know for a Successful Practice. It's great to see all of you here. And before we get started, I just want to take a moment to acknowledge the organizations that have brought you this session. First to Newly.com. If you're not familiar with them, they are a phenomenal platform, a one-stop shop where you can literally learn all kinds of key information about the psychedelic sector, including all the training programs that are available, the various clinics that are offering psychedelic therapy. You can learn a lot about psychedelic medicines and substances. They also feature a lot of research, including the latest clinical trials. And if you're interested in the business side of psychedelics, they have some really interesting profiles of the psychedelic companies and also investing opportunities. So be sure to check them out. You can find them at www.neuly.com. That's newly.com. And I also want to acknowledge and thank the folks at Remind Media. If you're not familiar with them, they are a new media and events platform that is focused on building, connecting, and educating diverse communities that responsibly grow the business of psychedelics. And you may have heard they have a really exciting event coming up in Las Vegas at the end of November, November 28th and 29th. They're going to be hosting the Psychedelic Business Forum in Las Vegas. And this is really interesting in the fact that they're one of the groups out there that's focused almost exclusively on the business side of psychedelics. So they're going to be bringing together entrepreneurs, business owners, investors, policymakers, and healthcare professionals who are working at the forefront of psychedelic medicine. It will be a great opportunity, if you attend, to meet and network with people that are working in the psychedelic space that are really moving the needle in terms of the business side. And I want to thank Christian Gray and Sarah Vaughn and the entire team at Remind Media for putting this event together. And I'm really looking forward to that event in Las Vegas. I've heard fantastic things about the event last year and encourage all of you to check that out and attend if you can. And my name is Sonia Stringer. If we haven't met, I am very grateful and pleased to be your moderator today. I am also the founder of Celebrating Women in Psychedelics, which is a podcast and a global online community that is bringing together women who are working in psychedelics and supporting them in developing successful careers and leadership opportunities. We are humbled and thrilled that we have almost 1,000 women now in our online platform. And I believe at last count, we had women from over 40 countries. So that just gives you an indication of how much psychedelic therapy and work is spreading quickly around the globe. And in our platform, we give women the opportunity to meet and network with each other, to learn about each other's work and support each other. We have all kinds of tools and resources and networking opportunities and mentoring as well. So if you are a woman interested in learning more about the psychedelic space, or if you'd like to be part of our community, please do come join. There's no charge for it. Just go to celebratingwomeninpsychedelics.com and you'll find more there. And I am especially honored, truly, to be able to moderate this session today. My background for the last 28 years, I have been involved in developing and offering all kinds of training programs outside the psychedelic space. Years ago, I started working with someone you probably know, Tony Robbins, way back in the seminar day when transformational work and seminars were kind of a big thing. And after that, I left and developed a lot of my own programs and had a chance to work with entrepreneurs all around the world. And in the last few years, I'm very honored to have had the opportunity to come in and actually do consulting in the psychedelic space. So I've had a chance to see firsthand how training and education has been developed in the space. And it really is a very exciting place to be working right now. And you've probably noticed that there have been a plethora of psychedelic companies and training opportunities developed here. There's a number of programs available today. And if you are a therapist, a practitioner, mental health professional, doctor, you may feel a bit overwhelmed trying to decide which of these programs is right for you, which are a good investment of your time and money, and which are going to be relevant in a few years as the whole psychedelic landscape changes. And you might also be an individual or a group who wants to offer training in the psychedelic space, an operator? And if so, you're probably looking at your competition and trying to decide what you can do that's unique and different and valuable, and how your programming might be affected in the years to come as the whole landscape changes as well. So we're going to dive deep into that today. We've got a phenomenal panel, and I'm really glad you're here, because we're going to have a chance towards the end also for you to ask questions and get answers to the things that are perhaps on your mind about psychedelic training. Before we do that, though, we do have a really awesome comments or chat feature along with this platform. So please take a look over to the right. You can enter your questions or comments there. And before we get started, thought it would be fun to do a quick survey with all of you. So the question I'd like to pose to you, and this is statistics that Newly actually gathered. They're pretty fascinating. What would you guess are the number of different psychedelic organizations that are offering training in this space? How many different organizations would you guess there are? And in total, do you have any estimate on the number of different psychedelic training programs there are? Go ahead and put it in the chat, and I'll see if I can read some of these off as we go through. And it guesses the number of different organizations and the number of programs as well. I'm just trying to make sure I can see. There we go. Okay. Stephanie, thank you for your answer. 400 to 500. That's a great guess. Anybody else? Idea of the number of different organizations and or the number of different programs? Charlie's thinking 50. Good guess. Michelle, great to see you. 150. 100 to 150. Ryan has no idea. Yeah, probably a lot of people agree with you, Ryan. 25 different organizations, at least a dozen programs I'm aware of. Thanks, Kyle, for that. Cheryl thinks 2,000. Wow. So we got answers all over the place. Rachel, 600. Organizations, 150. Some of you are quite close. So according to Newly, and I believe that these stats will be released soon, and you can actually go to their website and learn a lot more about the various organizations. But according to them, there are 144 different actual organizations, training organizations, offering training in the space, and at least 457 different training programs. So that gives you just a sense of the demand, of the interest in this work. I personally am thrilled to see that many people working in this space. And it does give you a sense too of just how competitive this space may become and how overwhelming it can be for the people that want to take those programs to be able to decide which ones are really right for them. So I'm going to take a moment now to introduce our panel. I'm thrilled to have the opportunity for you to meet Ingmar Gorman of Fluence, Dana Lerman of Skylight Psychedelics, and Joe Moore of Psychedelics Today. Each of these individuals are leading very successful training organizations. They have programs that are very well respected. And what's great about them as well is they all have different ways of structuring their programs. So what you're going to hear today is a really good cross-section of the kinds of training that is being offered in this space and the different ways in which people are doing this. So why don't we go around the room here and just have each of you just briefly introduce yourself and your organization, maybe take 1 or 2 minutes, and then we'll come back and have each of you share more details about the psychedelic training programs that you're offering. So Ingmar, why don't you take it away to get started here?
Great. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. I want to welcome your audience. So my name is Ingmar Gorman. I am a psychologist, a clinical psychologist by training, and I'm also the co-founder and CEO of a company called Fluence. And I started on this journey back in around 2003, where I learned about psychedelics, and I was in my early 20s. And I saw them as an underdog, this sort of overlooked potential medicine, perhaps one day. And I decided to dedicate my life and career to the subject, and had various opportunities to contribute to the field in small ways in the beginning. And probably one of the things that I'm most proud of in my career so far is as a co-principal investigator for MAPS's MDMA phase 2 and phase 3 studies in the treatment of post-traumatic stress disorder. So that's something that I bring with me to Fluence. where just to say a little bit about Fluence, I know we'll have an opportunity to say a lot more about it, but one of the core principles of Fluence is to really focus on training, community, and support. We see clinicians as the helpers, and we're here to help the helpers when it comes to psychedelic medicine. So maybe I'll leave it there, and we can pick it up when we come around.
Super. Thank you very much. Dana, would you please introduce yourself and Skylight, please?
Sure. Yes. Thank you so much. I think this is such an amazing topic, and I'm really happy to be here, especially with Joe and Ingmar and you, Sonia. It's nice to meet you. So my name's Dana Lerman. I'm a physician. I'm board certified internal medicine and infectious disease. I was a COVID provider, infectious disease consultant during the pandemic. And mid-pandemic, I actually had a calling to make a shift in my life. I ended up doing one of the training courses actually put out by IPI. And during the course, Rick Doblin started off by saying that he encouraged us to experience these medicines that we are learning about. And so I heard that call from Rick, and my younger brother had actually just come back from an ayahuasca journey down in Costa Rica. And so I decided I was going to go mid-pandemic and drink ayahuasca. And that really shifted my life, my career. I came back, completed IPI's course, and then really felt that there was a need for affordable training for people in this space, training that doesn't take a year or several months. And really because I felt like the people who suffer the most are the clients when their therapists can't get trained. It's the clients who can't access the medicine. So I started Skylight Psychedelics with my co-founder, addiction and forensic psychiatrist, Scott Bienenfeld, who's been working in the ketamine space for over a decade. And what we do at Skylight is we prescribe ketamine, sublingual ketamine, to be used in licensed and trained therapist offices across the country in every state. And we also train the therapists affordably. So thank you for, again, the opportunity, and look forward to talking about it more.
Lovely. Thank you so much. And last but not least, Joe Moore of Psychedelics Today. Please quickly introduce yourself.
Yeah, thanks for having me. So Psychedelics Today has been around for about 6.5 years. We're one of the larger media players and probably larger trainer operators in the space as well. Well over 10,000 people enrolled in our online platform. We also run a year-long program called Vital Psychedelic Training. That's been really well received in the marketplace. One of the differentiators is a mandatory experience. We don't say mandatory drug experience. We will offer alternatives if people aren't ready for a drug experience. So our background is in holotropic breathwork, transpersonal psychology, somatics. My co-founder, Kyle Buller, is a master's in somatic psychology and an interesting background in transpersonal psychology as well. And we are perhaps slightly different from the other two guests here in that we have a really big tent approach and that we want to train just about everybody out there. We believe we need a very robust and diverse workforce who comes from all different backgrounds in the space, and not everybody who's going to be working in the space needs to be a facilitator or needs to be a psychologist. We need well-informed accountants, graphic designers, people that can kind of support the experience, perhaps not as an integration coach or a space holder, but somebody who can help be in the same building perhaps as some of these experiences are happening. So there's a lot of room for a lot of jobs here. And there was a staggering figure somebody threw out earlier about how many clinics there are offering these services now in America. It's incredible. So there's a massive need for jobs, and we need a lot of people on deck. The Colorado person, I think in charge of the marijuana enforcement division, in Colorado put out a statement about the coming boom of jobs required in Colorado alone, particularly around kind of managing the large projects, taking in the revenue, all that kind of stuff. So there's just so much needed and so much is coming. I think we can't really overstate the need. And MAPS put out some staggering figures for the need for trained people coming really soon. Ingmar probably knows that figure better than me, but it was like many tens of thousands, I believe, if not more, people require psychedelic training.
Wow. Thank you, Joe. And that's such an important point. I mean, for those of you that are more familiar with the space, it is staggering to see the number of clinics, the number of training programs, and the fact that this is such an early part of the development of the space. I mean, we can only begin to imagine what's going to happen in the next 5 to 10 years. And I do encourage you to go to newly.com if you're curious to learn more about the space in general, because just going through their directory, you get a sense, already of the number of people that are working in the space. So thanks for that. And I just want to point out too, for those of you that want to go and check out each of the different organizations that we're talking about here, the links are in the chat. So make sure you take a look there. All right, well, let's go back. Each of you are quite well known in this space. Your programs are very well respected. And although there's similarities in a lot of psychedelic assisted training out there, there's some real distinct differences too. So why don't we go back then and talk in more detail about the programs that your organization offers. And Ingmar, maybe we can look at like who your programs are for, the kind of format that they're being offered in. Some people have got live in-person training. Some people are doing a lot of Zoom live interactive sessions. Some people have recorded versions of their programs, or a mix of all of that. And maybe we can talk a little bit about the pricing too, just to give people an idea of the kind of scope of what your organization's doing.
Absolutely. Thank you for that invitation. So one thing to just make clear, we train and focus mental health professionals. So I absolutely agree with Joe that we need a really well-informed workforce, and we've looked for those accountants and graphic designers, and sometimes they're hard to come by. But just in terms of where Fluence focuses its effort is really on the mental health professionals, because they have a scope of practice, and we really want to, again, kind of clone or replicate or solve the therapist bottleneck for licensed professionals who have a scope of practice, so that if they are going to be delivering psychedelic mental health care, there is a above ground, legal, regulated way to do that. And you might think of that as being a barrier or maybe something to complain about. But one thing that's important about that system is that it ensures certain safety. For example, the confidentiality of the client, right? There are consequences if a therapist acts unethically. Their license can be revoked. So we kind of operate within that framework. And the people who are doing the training, one of our criteria are that they have experience in psychedelic clinical trials. So they can, they've had that experience working in a above ground way, although clinical trial context is very different than working in the real world. And there are some important limitations to that as well. But they have that experience, and they're working with diagnosed individuals where the diagnosis is clear, and they can bring that knowledge to the students who take our courses. Our courses range in terms of price, so they can be, self-paced on-demand videos for people who don't necessarily have a license or aren't looking to practice but want to get a little taste of this information, and those are on the lower end, maybe even free webinars or several $100s for a pretty robust self-paced training. And then our programs used to go all the way up to the price of like $9,000 for a year-long program that had clinical consultation groups and a lot of live learning. And we've actually now launched a new structure to our certifications. And this new structure decreases the cost and the time. So I think, we might be somewhere in between Dana's program and Joe's program, although I know they also have a lot of different offerings and different ways to access it. But our newly launched certificate is somewhere around the 30-hour mark in terms of self-paced and live interaction, but we also give a ton of content there. And this program is called the Psychedelic Therapy and Integration Certificate. It's a foundational certificate that costs $2,500. And it gives a particular focus on psychedelic therapy broadly, foundations, as well as psychedelic harm reduction with a particular focus on integration. And if somebody takes that and they want to then pursue a molecule-specific focus, so say they want to become a ketamine therapist, or they want to go deeper into the integration process, or one day become an MDMA therapist, we have those additional modules that people can take and customize their education, educational experience and their certification. One thing I'll say here is the question around the length and duration and quality of the experience that people have during the training process is really a great question that I don't think we have the answer to. You know, we used to offer year-long training. That can feel long, or that can be long. I mean, it can also feel incredibly rich for people, but I don't want to take away from that. But there's this, you know, what is the middle ground, right? What is the minimum that you have to do to equip the learners, but also give them enough so that we're sure that they have the skills to be able to deploy the treatment.
Great. Super.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. All right, let's turn the mic over to Dana. Would you share a little bit more about the programs that you're offering through Skylight?
Yes, thank you. And thanks, Ingmar. It's so awesome to hear about you guys offering that new course. So at Skylight, what we do is our initial course offering is, first of all, our courses are for everyone. We have a vast underground psychedelic world that is happening, and we all know about it. And we have had real communication with the underground providers and practitioners, and really believe that, you know, it's important to offer them training, and because we know that they're doing it. And so in our ketamine practice, we only will prescribe ketamine to be used in a licensed therapist office. However, all of our training courses are available to anyone who's looking to have information about these medicines. And so we offer an online self-paced course on ketamine-assisted therapy. We also have a course on psilocybin-assisted therapy, what we actually call it, a comprehensive harm reduction guide for the underground. All the things that I feel like I wanted to know, and I didn't learn. Things that I really felt like were going to come up in a space, and I wanted to be prepared for, or I wanted to show people the different things that can come up in these underground spaces, really not promoting underground work, but from a harm reduction perspective. So our ketamine course is $4.99 online. Our psilocybin harm reduction course is $6.99. And we have a bundle package where people can access both of those courses for $8.49. We also just launched a Hape course. As many people in the space are familiar, Hape is a sacred ceremonial tobacco snuff that is used in many indigenous communities. But like many of these medicines, Hape is coming out of the jungle. And so we're seeing this medicine being utilized in many different spaces here in the United States. And what really prompted me to make a course on Hape was I saw people using it at a party. And to me, it's really important to educate people into the uses of these medicines and to honor their sacred traditions. Which also brings me to our live course that we're promoting. So we have a live course that I'll talk about also later in more detail, but it's a 52-hour course, not over the course of a year, but 2-hour blocks with various different topics, indigenous medicine keepers really coming forth and forward, talking about their medicines that they hold sacred, and really allowing space for communication with our community. Again, not just licensed therapists, but medicines like Wachuma, Yahe, Hape, doing a live Hape ceremony in our course. Also having a la carte opportunities to choose different medicine retreat spaces, both here in the United States and abroad. But you know, that really, I think, when it comes down to what is enough, you know, content, what is enough time, I don't think that anyone knows. And I think it really is about the individual and what that person needs. And luckily, there's all these different opportunities, from Ingmar's program to Joe's program to the other several hundred programs that are out there, because many people have been doing this work for a really long time. And they don't need to reinvent the wheel. And many people are trained licensed therapists who have extensive training. And we at Skylight offer this $4.99 ketamine course and the psilocybin course because we really honor that existing training, and we look at holding space for medicines as really an adjunct to existing training. And so that's what we really focus on. Plus, anyone who does any of our training courses has access to our online community. So we have an online community where we meet every other week. We hold office hours. We talk about interesting, challenging cases with all medicines. And it's a really amazing, supportive community. And even further, we also offer any of our clients that we prescribe ketamine to have their own group space with one of our therapists every other week. But even further for the therapist is that we know how challenging this work is. We know because we do it ourselves. We are physicians who sit in ceremony and do the work ourselves. And we know how important integration of this work is. And so we also offer additional support online for our therapists to have their own integration sessions with Elizabeth Wolfson, who joined us from Field Trip. So it's an amazing, we really just believe in the spirit of the medicine, and the community is so critical. So that's really what we're about at Skylight.
Love it. Thank you so much. And Joe, would you share a bit more about Vital then, who that program is really focused on and how it's structured and the price point involved there?
Yeah, thanks for asking. So we started ages ago training, and we developed it for college kids. We wanted to make sure people had an easier time, kind of a harm reduction lens, scratch your own itch thing. Doctors, therapists were showing up, so we started building out programming for them more specially. And then over time, we realized there was a really big need for larger training programs and new training programs. At the time, I believe the only ones of note were CIIS and the MAPS training, or what we were looking at. And we thought we might be able to do something different and something that we might even like better personally than those programs. So we developed Vital. Vital is kind of modeled, honestly, after the training program that Stanislav Grof developed for holotropic breathwork. That's kind of our foundational platform. In our marketing, everybody will see that we kind of took the classical elements and kind of took metaphors out of each one to break down our program into different areas, which was really a fun process. So we cover everything from theory and practice to philosophy. We actually think it's really important to study philosophy here because we get into some very strange situations out there. And not everybody shares the same cosmology that might be appropriate to learn philosophy from an Amazonian shaman. They come from a very different orientation than somebody from the Bronx or Alabama, so there's a lot of room for diversity there in philosophy. And I think it's just important and a good integration tool, honestly, to do that. So the program itself, we wanted to welcome folks from all walks of life. We wanted physicians, we wanted yoga teachers, we want therapists, and we want them to all be together. I find there's a certain kind of magic transmutation that's happening when a clinician, somebody that's been practicing for 20 years gets to sit down with somebody who has a wildly different background and also shows tremendous wisdom or shared curiosity, right? And we've found that our students are actually staying in touch well over a year after the program's over, which is amazing. They're actually organizing their own events, starting businesses. And these are people who weren't necessarily clinicians when taking the program. I think one student even has a big venture capital firm now. It's funny to track all this because it's so diverse. And I think even one doctor was an anesthesiologist and started cutting over after Vital and doing a lot more psychiatry training. So really fascinating to see that, people will jump in and do transformational ed, Sonia, kind of as you were suggesting earlier. And that's kind of how we're seeing it now. A lot of people jump in and think, oh, I really want to be a facilitator. And they don't really know. They don't know how complex it is, how sticky it can be. And maybe 3/4 of the way through the training, you say, wow, I need to actually do a lot more research internally, soul searching, before I actually know where I want to be in this space. So Vital isn't explicitly a psychedelic facilitator training program. Like nobody's really able to legally do that as such around like psilocybin and whatever. Like we can't just say, oh yeah, cool, you're allowed to break federal law now with mushrooms. It's more like people are doing this anyway. People should have this training. I think for the good of the industry as a whole and for humanity as a whole, we have an obligation to train as many people as possible in an affordable way so that there's less bad stories in the news and that we can continue to make amazing progress. I don't know if folks saw the bad news yesterday, but just remember that hundreds of people in America die every day from alcohol. And we always want to keep things in context and work to reduce harm everywhere we can in the system. And this is a big thing we talk about too. Vital is a very drug agnostic program. And so we want to really make sure people understand the drug war as a whole, understand the relationship, the historical relationship between humans and drugs generally, and find your path. Where do you want to be? I try not to push too hard an agenda in there and philosophical frame, but I want people to explore it for them. So yeah, and we've got a robust staff that helps folks with that. So thank you.
Love it. And I think from what I've seen, Joe, your organization has one of the longer, more comprehensive programs. It takes place over 12 months. Is that correct? And I think it's mostly virtual, but then you have an experiential component. People
right.
Can,
Yeah. It's usually we'll do retreats in Costa Rica, Jamaica, Netherlands. We're going to start doing more domestic ones. We've done 2 or 3 domestic retreats so far in the US, largely breath work. We're going to be integrating ketamine in the near future. And we're looking at exploring introducing other substances, but we want to be really delicate around the cultural situations there.
Got it. Great. And just to point out to the audience, the diversity that's being represented here, Fluence is really focused on licensed and pre-licensed individuals and their programs. And Skylight is a lot of the trainings being offered by licensed psychiatrists and doctors who are very psychedelically informed. And although your CAP program, I believe, is mostly focused on the licensed people, you're also very inclusive of the underground and really want to support people that aren't necessarily licensed and being exposed to training that's really useful and effective and helps with harm reduction. And Joe, it sounds like you've almost looked at the other side of the equation and really cast that broad net to include everybody. And I know there's also licensed people that come through your program too. So it's nice to see that focus and that sort of diversity of individuals that are being attracted into the programs that you're doing. And if you're looking at the sort of marketplace of psychedelic assisted therapy training, obviously it's getting very full out there. It's busy. It's probably going to become more so. So I can imagine as an organization, it can be quite a challenge to differentiate your programs in a way that really helps them stand out from other offers. So could we go around again and just maybe take 30 seconds or a minute? If there's a particular feature that you feel makes your programming unique, please share it so that people can perhaps also get a sense of what really helps your programming stand out amongst the noise. So Dana, maybe we'll go to you first, if you don't mind, because I know you've really had an emphasis there on accessibility, correct?
Yeah, sure thing. Thank you. So I think what really stands out about Skylight is the accessibility, the affordability of that, and also that we are prescribers nationally of ketamine to be used only in the therapist offices who have completed our training. Also, the focus that we have on community is really important, and it's important to note that our therapists don't have to pay us a monthly fee to be a part of our community. Once you take our training course, you are a part of our community until we do not exist anymore. So you are more than welcome to continue on with us. The other thing that is also important to highlight that Skylight does is we also offer experientials. We believe that should be an option for people. And there are various people who cannot have psychedelic medicine experiences for various reasons. And so we make that an option for people. We offer these experientials in Colorado, but we can also travel to any state and offer these experientials. So we have a team that does that. I think that those are the main things that really separate us from other companies, is that the idea or the fact that we are in all 50 states operating.
Love it. Super. And Ingmar, I know with Fluence, you've developed some pretty significant partnerships with.
Right. Yeah. Thank you for that. So I think one of the things that helps us stand out is that we don't not only train therapists in the community, but also mental health professionals who are working in clinical trials. And so some of our partners include Cybin, Beckley SciTech, Clairvoyant. We have some other really big announcements coming up soon in terms of new partnerships. But essentially, the biggest names in psychedelic pharmaceutical drug development, we train their therapists. And so we see ourselves as sort of a bridge between industry and practice and science. So we can bring that information from the science and industry into practice for the practitioners. And so an evidence-based approach is something that's really important for us. And so you could think of us, if you think of psychedelics as something that are boundary dissolving or disruptors, you could think of Fluence as something that, as an organization that has a philosophy that's a little bit more on the boundaried side, right? So what does it mean for a therapist to disclose to their client that they have taken a psychedelic in the past? That has to be a very careful choice that a person makes. When it comes to experientials, we have in-person retreats that focus on a mindfulness approach, but we're hesitant to do anything related to giving people psychedelics because, one, it can be in the gray area of the law and medical practice in certain situations, and two, what does that mean for the teacher relationship, that they're in relationship with the student, and then they're using a psychedelic together? And it's not necessarily something that should be prohibited or wrong, but for us as an organization, yeah, we're just a little bit more conservative there. That's the decision that we decided to make.
That's great. Super. And Joe, how about yourself?
Yeah, it's a tough one. So our programs range anywhere from free to $20. Our 47-hour programs like $1,600. So we believe in accessibility too, and a lot of these are CE approved. In terms of the experience, Ingmar makes some good points there about, should we be having an experience with students? And we're trying to figure that out. We want to kind of create some sort of distance there so it can be a little less sloppy, because there can be problems there for sure. And we've seen that in the psychedelic space in the past, for sure, just in the last handful of years. So yeah, those are some big differentiators. Yeah, our Vital program is $12,000, so it's, steep, but it is something that, will connect you to so many things, and you'll have so many opportunities after, and it'll really broaden your world. So if you're not exactly sure where you want to be, that might be the program for you.
And would you be able to quickly comment? I know it's probably still in development, but I think you're the only organization I've seen that's really focused on developing something that would be workable in Oregon, a group that's kind of training on a national level, or international level even, but you're also trying to really fit into that Oregon model. What can you share about that real quick?
So according to the state of Oregon, I can't mark it yet, but we're developing a program there in Oregon, and that will be for a career track, kind of state level licensure for what I think is most appropriately termed supported adult use. So clinicians aren't exactly allowed to practice as such in Oregon. It could get them licensure issues. So this is creating a whole new category of people in Oregon. The requirements are quite low. I think it's high school diploma or GED and no violent criminal offenses. And that's about it. And this training program, the requirements, I'm actually excited about how light the requirements are, because it's only supported adult use. If it was something approaching therapy or more serious work, I would want there to be a much more robust training program, but the state chose not to do that. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out. There's more facilities coming online. Businesses can finally feel more comfortable opening up because insurance is becoming available in Oregon, which is a really big topic. I think insurance companies will play an interesting role in helping us develop our training requirements, by the way, everybody. So we'll probably be in collaboration with insurance companies quite a bit. So yeah, and Sonia, this is also now unfolding in Colorado. So in real time, we're doing Oregon and watching very carefully what's happening in Colorado, because there will be room for clinicians to practice in Colorado, which will be quite interesting. Though, there's going to be all sorts of caveats, of course. So it's a really exciting time to see that this could be at least state level legal for a professional set of folks, coming quite soon.
That's great. Super. And if we're looking at the marketplace again through that business lens, could we just talk briefly about the opportunities and challenges that groups like yours are facing? Maybe we could look at the opportunities first. Like, even though it is becoming a little more crowded out there, clearly there's a demand for this kind of training. So could each of you let us know, or just estimate the number of people that have gone through your programs in the last couple of years, and what you anticipate in the next year or two? Joe, maybe we'll go back and start with you, because I know Vital's been quite popular.
Yeah. I think in our e-learning platform, I think I said a little over 10,000. I think it's roughly 22,000 enrolled in our e-learning platform. So that's been amazing. It's all sorts of programs in there. And yeah, we've had roughly 300 people through Vital, I think maybe more. And yeah, we'll kick it off again in January. And we're trying to sync up with the academic calendar to make it more convenient for folks. So go ahead.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. And do you anticipate that growth continuing in the next few years?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we're planning to double, if not quadruple. We're looking at expanding into Australia as well. We're teaching some cohorts there now, as they're the first country to actually have legal prescription MDMA and psilocybin together. We've got some interesting partners down there. And yeah, just kind of watching the global landscape, seeing how we can support this whole really important movement.
Super. Ingmar, I know there's been strong demand for the programs at Fluence too. Could you give us an idea of how many students have gone through those in the last few years and what you anticipate in 2024?
Yeah, for sure. So we have, again, various ways that people can access our learning experiences. So I'd say that we have, in terms of looking at our certificate programs, we have probably 300 people who've gone through our certificate programs over the courses of our existence. And when it comes to, we are an approved program in Oregon. We've trained 150 people there last year. And then for our drug sponsors, we have trained probably around 300 clinicians who've gone through clinical trials, and that's continuing to grow.
That's great. And Dana, how about you? I think Skylight might be one of the newer organizations, but I know there's demand for what you're doing too.
Yeah, we've been, Skylight's been in operation for a little over a year now. We're a new startup, but we've trained almost 400 people to date. And I did want to also add a few things that in terms of insurance, I think it is important to name Anthea and what Anthea is doing. Anthea is offering coverage for ketamine-assisted therapy for employees of certain companies that sign up with them. And so we have a collaborative partnership relationship with Anthea. And so we work with them in treating the employees that they're covering in certain states. What else did I also think it's really important to name in terms of experientials and legality. So as a physician-owned group, we are very aware of legal implications and diagnoses that people must have in terms of offering them medicine experiences. So if someone doesn't have a reason to have ketamine prescribed and not just to have an experience, they will not have ketamine prescribed. So everyone who we prescribe ketamine to has an intake and an evaluation to ensure. And believe it or not, many of the people who come into this work have stuff that they have going on that they're trying to work on. So this is not just, it's very important to really highlight that this is not just to have an experience with ketamine. These people are coming to do work on themselves and have their own stuff going on that they're trying to process. So I just wanted to check in and name that.
Wonderful. Thank you. And since that topic of insurance has come up, there's speculation that as insurance becomes a bigger part of the psychedelic space, that there will be some potentially strong opinions from those companies in terms of what kind of requirements are going to be put in place, how that might affect training programs like yourselves. And also, I just wanted to bring up the group APA, which some of you may be familiar with. If you're not, it's the American Psychedelic Practitioners Association. It's a group of professionals that have come together that are working to create a standardized set of guidelines for psychedelic assisted therapy, which I think a lot of people, agree is needed potentially in this space. But I'm curious, as owners, operators of psychedelic training companies, how do you feel about that? Because, in many cases, you've worked hard to curate your programs, and then, there's a lot that could potentially happen in the landscape in the next few years that could really dictate what happens in training. So curious if any of you want to comment on that and how you anticipate that as a business. How do you know, potentially how you might need to sort of shift to remain relevant in the landscape? Joe, do you want to take that since you brought up the insurance originally?
APA is doing some important work because there's historically been some tragically bad training programs, and some people have been hurt. It's important that we have some sort of standard. That's kind of how the government has to operate at this. We have quite a bit of people here in America, and we have to manage this many people with a lot of diversity in thinking. So standards are going to be important. I was on some of the earliest phone calls with APA, and I was just flabbergasted at the scope of the project. And I was really happy people were there, able to, step in and be patient enough to do this. And I think in terms of being flexible with businesses, it's as a business operator, it's important to be close to those folks and understand, and just kind of learn ahead of time what they're thinking and what things might land on. And then also, realize that perhaps APA isn't the group. Maybe there's a couple others. Things will always unfold, and there's always uncertainty. I really applaud the efforts of APA, and I hope they win. But who knows, right? It's we have to be comfortable in the face of a bit of uncertainty in business. We wouldn't be business owners if there wasn't a bit of courage involved, right? So that's kind of it, Sonia. I think we just have to be really close to these organizations and get involved and kind of just watch what's going to happen.
Right. And I can imagine groups like that, would ideally want to solicit input from leaders like yourself, because having offered this training for a while, I'm sure you're noticing what is really important to include and potentially what might not be as relevant. So I would hope ideally it would be a discussion, conversation back and forth between all the groups involved. Dana, did you have any take on that in terms of groups like APA or how insurance might, ultimately dictate a lot of what happens here in the training space?
Yeah, I think in terms of APA, I think organizations like this are very important. I think having some guidelines and standards is it exists in medicine. We call psychedelic drugs medicines because they are medicines and they need to be treated as such. And so when you're dealing with other medicines, they have guidance and standards. And so this is no different. However, I think it is critical to not lose sight of the underground, and the underground needing appropriate education that, many people, even in Oregon and in Colorado, you're going to decriminalize, we've decriminalized these medicines here, but there are many underground providers who don't want to get licensed, who don't want to be affiliated with a licensed healing center. They don't want to be told what to do, where to get their medicine, how to chart, how much to, to be in a certain location and place, and you can't be within several, I think it's almost even 100 feet of a school zone. And there's a lot of things going on in that space. And so I really think it's important to have options for people. And so to have these standardized guidelines that also the underground can look at and learn from, and then also have the ability to be able to teach the underground how to operate in their space as safely as they possibly can. And I mean, one of the initiatives also at Skylight that I'm working on is connecting with the growers and giving them a link to a harm reduction space, a harm reduction site where people can go and learn about the interactions between psilocybin and many medicines. I mean, there are people out there who are on lithium who are using psilocybin. They don't know that they could have a seizure. This is a problem, right? We've decriminalized these medicines, but they are medicines, and medicines come or should come with guidance, right? We can't, now we're backpedaling, 122 passed, and everyone's in many of us in the psychedelic space are happy. However, we're backpedaling because we need to teach people how to not have a seizure on lithium with psilocybin. So there's a lot of room for education, and I think APA is long answer. It is it's an important thing to have some structure and some guidance, but really not losing sight of the underground.
Great, thank you. Wonderful point. Ingmar, anything you'd add?
Yeah, I mean, I'd definitely like to jump in. I mean, first, I feel like I need to just explain that historically, when I kind of have emerged in this space, it was before we had such success in terms of the psychedelic movement and research. And there were many very, very conservative researchers that were concerned that this could all come crashing down if we overstepped in some sort of way. And so when we talk about insurance, we're talking about, how do I put this? I want to say the man, but that's, we're talking about these highly regulated governmentally connected institutions. And so doing things sort of, I always go by the book and then push a little bit. That's my philosophy. And so what's going to be important? Well, working with the FDA, it's going to be the Food and Drug Administration. It means collecting data, both in terms of the medicines, their safety profiles, their risk profile, as well as data from training companies in terms of how does training impact outcome. And I, with absolute full respect to Dana, sorry, I want to just push back on one little thing, which is the word medicine really depends on the context, right? So if we're talking about traditional use, if we're talking about, use in the underground, yes, medicine, but for example, if, in my position, or if somebody at the MAPS or another drug sponsor said MDMA is a medicine, psilocybin is a medicine, that could jeopardize the success of MDMA or psilocybin becoming a prescribable medicine that would be covered by insurance. Because in the sort of the, whatever the word you want to use, Western context, in the context of the US, these ketamine is a medicine. MDMA psilocybin is not yet a medicine. Hopefully it will be one day. So I know for our audience, probably that may not be so important, but I think I think it's important, again, depending on the context that you're working in. Of course, to call these something like psilocybin not a medicine within a certain cultural context would be, a great, egregious thing to do. So I just wanted to mention that.
Great, thank you for that. Really helpful.
Can I jump in really quickly just to, and I don't mean to have a back and forth, but I just wanted to add one thing. I am not at all saying that these are FDA approved medicines, but I would never sit here and say that MDMA is not a medicine, ayahuasca is not a medicine, psilocybin is not a medicine. Clearly, the context in which you work with these substances, but even if you go and you sit at Red Rocks and try to have a lovely time listening to music on psilocybin, you will very often encounter that is a full-on medicine. So I think it is, I agree, it's not FDA recognized medication that is legal. So I think there's the difference there.
Got it. Good point. Thank you so much. And we're going to move into Q&A with our audience here in just a moment. But before we do, can we shift from looking at the space through that business lens and look at it more as a potential participant in this type of training? Because obviously, if you're a doctor, mental health practitioner, therapist, anybody really that wants to get trained in psychedelic assisted therapy, there's so many options out there. So now that you've been on the other side of it, what kind of questions should people be asking when they're reviewing training programs, when they're trying to identify how relevant a particular training is going to be? What advice would you give to those potential participants to really assess the value of a program beforehand, before they invest their time and money? Any thoughts there? And maybe even, red flags that they should be looking for, because clearly, even though an organization is offering training in this space, doesn't necessarily mean they're qualified or should be. So if you have any opinions on that, please share that too. Joe, why don't we start with you? Because I think you probably have a lot to say on the red flag topic, especially.
Let's start with the red flag topic. So similar to the advice I give around finding an underground guide, I would take your time selecting a program. Number one, get referrals from hopefully at least 3 different people, kind of not in the same clique, get some testimonials from them firsthand. Because, some of these organizations, I hate to use this word in a room like this, but some of these organizations will set up cults, and we have to be careful. So that's why we have to go slow, really suss out the scenario and be pretty careful. And yeah, I think people, interview the teachers about, what are your values? What is your mission? And see if it makes sense to you and aligns with your values. Because some people can go in some very strange directions, and you want to make sure you're on the right train before it leaves the station. Yeah, it's probably good on that one.
Okay, love it. Thank you. Really helpful. Dana, what would you add to that in terms of assessing qualifications, that kind of thing?
Yeah, I think I'm with Joe, and I think it's important, obviously, to do your homework. It's important to call the company, learn about them, read all you can, talk to your community about it, see if you knew people who went through that program. I think it's also really important to understand the spirit of the company that you're working with. Who owns the company? Who are those people? What do they believe is important? Do they believe in community? Is that something you believe in? Is that something you want and need? Is that going to be available to you? Can you drop into their community space and be held in a container just for you? I mean, I've shown up in my our Skylight Zoom office hours, and the therapist held me in a container, integrating my Burning Man experience. So I think that kind of thing, it's really important to know what you need, what you're looking for, right? What's your level of experience going into this space? Do you need a year-long training program? What do they teach you in these training programs? Learn the content. What's the material that you're going to be learning? And is it important to you to work with a company that really honors Indigenous medicine keepers? Is that something that you want to be connected to? Are they working with, right now we're training companies in Israel, medical practices in Israel. I think a lot of it for me is the spirit of the program. What is the spirit of the program? Is it medical? Is it spiritual? I think that's a really important thing to check in about for people.
Love it. And I think that's a really valid point. Each particular type of training has its own potential stamp, right? In terms of its brand, its focus. So you don't have to be all things to all people, but finding those programs that really align with who you are, your profession, and where you want to go in this space is super important. And it's great that we have so many choices for people to do that, for sure. Ingmar, what would you add to that in terms of just recommendations?
Yeah, I don't know if there's much more to add. I mean, both Joe and Dana, they really spoke well to this topic. And I know both of them well, and they have done really their due diligence in terms of setting up really excellent training programs that are ethical and provide a high quality training. So I just want to recognize that and say that. I think for us, as a piece of advice, maybe, I mentioned boundaries before, something to pay attention to. I mean, it really comes down to that experience. If you're going to be doing those experientials, recognizing that what kind of experience that you want to have and what boundaries are important for you, and that's different for different people, right? And so I totally agree with Dana on that. For maybe another thing would be talking about regulation and permission and licenses. Like Oregon is a great step because it creates a license. So if somebody's seeking to go to a school, what is the outcome? What will this enable me to do? That's a really important thing to think about. And so for us at Fluence, we're going to be launching our MDMA program in collaboration with MAPS. And so that's for us one way that we sometimes do things a little bit later, but because we're kind of waiting for the collaborative partners and institutions and powers that be to for us to step alongside them.
Great. All right. Well, we're going to open it up for Q&A. So if any of you here would like to pop a question in the chat, we will have an opportunity to get those answered. And as we're wrapping, I'd just love to give each of our panelists the opportunity to make an announcement. If you have an upcoming program you want people to be aware of, or something new in your organization that you're excited about, please do share it. So Dana, let's go back to you, if you would. What's coming up for Skylight in the next one?
Yeah, sure. First of all, I wanted to offer a 10% off discount code for any of our training courses. It's called Learn 10. And the other thing I really wanted to highlight are the two courses that we just that we're launching. So we just launched the Hop A course, like I told you about. It's only $99. And then we have our live course that's coming early 2024, which is really focusing a lot on, we go over the traditional psilocybin, ketamine, MDMA medicines. Those are all taught by physicians in the psychedelic space. But we really also highlight a lot of things that aren't covered in traditional training programs. We talk about, besides the indigenous medicines that I mentioned before, like Hop A and also Yahe, we also talk about LSD, 5-MeO, DMT, Wachuma. We talk about EMDR and psychedelics, couples therapy and psychedelics. A lot of the things that aren't covered a lot of the times in these spaces. We have a 2-hour block on harm reduction by someone really well known in the space that we're really excited about. So there's a lot of opportunity in this experience. Also with our a la carte retreat options with Iboga, Yahe, psilocybin here in Colorado, ketamine. There's various medicines that are included, Wachuma, medicine experiences that people can have through our program. And yeah, I think that that's really something I really care a lot about, is respecting the Indigenous in this community and bringing them a place to talk and connect with the psychedelic medicine community.
Fantastic. Great offers. So for those of you interested in learning more, please go and Google Skylight Psychedelics and you'll find out all kinds of information about those opportunities. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Yeah. And again, the course is 52-hour course, and it's less than 4,000. So
Super.
under
Great.
that, so.
All right. And Joe, how about you? What do you want people to know about Vital? It sounds like you might be starting enrollment again very soon. Yeah.
Yeah, we've opened up applications. Enrollments are underway. If people sign up early, they can get some substantial discounts. I think at least $1,000 off if they sign up in the near future. We will be starting that, I think, mid to late January. So you have some time. So if you have questions, please do reach out to us. Vital Oregon, I'm sure we're going to start being able to do some marketing in the nearish future for that. I imagine December is when I'm hoping we can start sharing news about it. But we have to be careful on account of the state's rules. And we have ongoing enrollments for our Navigating Psychedelics program. You can buy the 35-hour program for about $700. And then our live supported version of that at 47 hours will go for about $1,700 US, and that's CE approved. So please, check out our offerings, see if there's a good fit for you. And we do have a subscription community called Navigators. It's about $3 a month or something. And we do a lot of special value in there for our members.
Great. And yes, any of you listening, if you're not familiar with the podcast too, that Psychedelics Today puts out, make sure you go check that out and add yourself to the list to stay in the loop on all the various media that you cover. Because in addition to Vital, you guys do a ton of other stuff. It's really invaluable information. Thank you. Ingmar, do you want to share a little bit more about the MDMA? And I think your certificate course too is
just to say, Psychedelics Today is definitely the best psychedelics podcast. Recently you've had some really heavy hitters as guests on there, so definitely recommend everybody to check it out. As it comes in terms of Fluence, we just 2 weeks ago relaunched our certificate program. So for $2,500, it's a 3-month foundational program, and then we're launching our MDMA education program in collaboration with MAPS, and that will be for $3,000, and it's a really very intense 6-day, not full 6 days, not all in back to back, with clinical videos from the clinical trials where people can actually observe participants in these studies, how they respond over the course of the study, and with everybody who's involved, again, are leaders and trainers in the clinical trials. So that cohort the MDMA cohort is starting in January. We have several cohorts for the PTI program, one starting November 7th. So check that out very quickly. We'll be closing enrollment soon, but there'll be another cohort in January as well.
Super. And Fluence is spelled FLUENCE.com. It's Fluence Training, actually, I believe.
Fluencetraining.com, or you can go to fluence.org. It's a URL that we never use, although it's probably shorter and easier to remember.
Easy to remember in Google, for sure. And I believe Christian and Logan have been popping those links in the chat. So if any of you need links on anything we've mentioned, please go search there and you can easily click through and find out information on all this. So we're going to open it up for Q&A. But before we do, I just want to truly acknowledge all three of you, not just for being here, but the saying goes that the pioneers are the ones that take all the arrows. And truly, your organizations are pioneering the way in this space. And I know it's a rewarding job, but it's also very, very challenging at times. So I personally want to acknowledge you for the amazing work you're doing and your dedication to really creating enormous value and forwarding this entire space. So thank you for that, and really look forward to staying in touch and watching how your organizations evolve in the coming years. Thanks so much for being here. And we do have a number of questions. Maybe we'll start with Jeremy's here, because I think this is a topic we didn't really get into, but it's super relevant. As universities increasingly enter the training space with their own post-grad programs, how do you plan to differentiate your programs as a private training provider? There aren't a lot, but there's certainly, more at least introductory programs I know of in Canada that are starting to pop up at universities. And that could potentially be something that's featured more in curriculum, I guess, in different places. I wonder, in terms of like the experiential sort of hands-on training component, if that would be part of it, or if it would be maybe a little more theoretical. What are your thoughts on that?
I'll jump in. I have some thoughts on this. So,
Sure.
From the Psychedelics Today Vital perspective, we are curious in partnering with universities and trying to figure out how we can support the development of these programs at assorted universities. So that's one angle. The other angle is, as Psychedelics Today, an entity that does not receive federal grant money, we're granted substantial latitude relative to what a university can do. For instance, teaching certain harm reduction things well, like reagent drug testing, isn't something that can really happen on a university campus because it does put their federal grant money at risk to some degree or another. So there are things that we can do in our non-university training programs that they're not able to do. Mm-hmm. So I would lean into those things quite a bit. That's kind of where I'm thinking.
Sure.
Yeah.
Ingmar, yeah, sure, please.
Ingmar, if you wanted to go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Go ahead. I'll just pick.
Thank you. I think it's a great question, Jeremy. This is something that I've thought about a lot. It's obviously coming. The trainings are going to be incorporated into, ultimately they're going to be a part of the routine curriculum, right? This is what's going to happen. And so we are really prepared for that, in that our focus is probably going to shift less from training and more into more of the prescribing arena. I mean, we're already in that space, so that's how we will be navigating that. But also, a lot of the programs that are coming out of the schools might be more traditional. And then I think that there's still going to be room for and a need for this non-ordinary course on psychedelic assisted therapy that, people like us are offering. So that's really our way to navigate that, but it's definitely coming.
Yeah. Anything you want to add there, Ingmar?
Yeah, just I think something that was said earlier, which is, it's depending on what a person is looking for. I think universities often offer the degree granting institutions. It can be a 1 year or more like a 2 year, 4 year program. And so I think we all kind of also represent postgraduate training in that way. Another, from a business tactics perspective, at Fluence, we have a content studio, so we film everything in studio, and we can license our training content to other organizations. That's another way, just from a business perspective, to be able to participate.
Brilliant point. Really great. Thanks. This question's for Joe, I believe, from Angela Ross. She's asking how she can learn more about the program in Oregon that you mentioned with Vital.
Angela, I would just get on our email list and we'll be making announcements. So if you're on our emails and our social, you'll hear about it. No problem. That's probably the best route.
Great. Question here from Stephanie Abrams. I think we touched on this, but maybe there's other groups we should also mention. She's asking, is there a board coming together to help certify that a training program is legitimate? We've talked about APA. Are there other groups that any of you know of we should mention as well? I think they're the main one at the moment.
They're the main one at the moment. I'm thinking there's a second one that's trying to be competitive. I have no idea what they're called, though.
I'm forgetting the acronym myself.
Yeah.
But maybe,
so yes,
maybe
is the answer.
But maybe, if we could just dig into this question a little bit, which is one of the challenges in terms of a board is that, APA is the American Psychedelic Practitioners Association. And so what it does is it brings together different practitioners, which is definitely needed, but to recognize the challenge, right? That boards and societies, not necessarily society, but boards and professional organizations, you have the psychologists, you have the social workers, you have the county. So what I'm saying here is bringing together different licensed professionals under different bodies with different state regulations under sort of one tent is needed, but it's an incredible challenge. And I think that that's what is being faced. And my opinion on this is that I think that we're hopefully, fingers crossed, we will have prescribable psychedelic medicine federally, probably before any kind of body is set up to kind of regulate training programs, or probably even regulate practitioners. I mean, with the exception of the FDA and what's called the REMS, which is the risk evaluation and mitigation strategy that kind of like manages and oversees how medicine is prescribed.
Yeah, great point. Anything to add there, Dana? Nope. But it is as I think we all agree, a needed opportunity, some level of governance or agreement around the at least basic guidelines of psychedelic assisted therapy. And with so many different stakeholders involved, I think that is the big question, is who's really empowered or should be empowered to make those decisions. It's still a big question and something that is in development as we speak. All right, just want to ask one more thing here. Ryan's asking, are there organizations or review boards that accept research proposals in this field? Not sure if I'm totally clear on that. Does that make sense to anybody here?
I can stab at this. So review boards, yes, there are independent review boards that approve research in psychedelics. This is part of the kind of normal way research is done in the academy and in biotech. So yes, is the answer. So those kind of groups are baked into universities often. Sometimes they're standalone ones. I only know a handful of those. And in terms of accepting research proposals, this could be seen a lot of different ways, this question. So yes, there is research happening. People can apply to do research. There's not as much funding as we would want. I'm a founding board member at the Psychedelic Medicine Coalition, and we're working to increase federal science funding for psychedelic research, which would be distributed well among any kind of grant applicant who has the right credentials to do this certain kind of research. We're at a multi-decade gap in the data on account of the drug war, and we're making up for lost time right now, which is why this feels so urgent. We're making up for decades of lost time, everybody. And yes, research is super important.
Yes. Just a comment here. Maybe you want to weigh in on this. Kawasi, I hope I'm saying your name correctly, or it might be Swasi. Just mentioning we should get away from the term harm reduction and move towards risk reduction, as using harm reduction sort of implies that there's implicit harm in these medicines. Any quick thoughts on that as well?
Yeah, we really need to start reframing this. Dr. David Nutt put out a study in the Lancet with some colleagues about risk profile, harm profile across a number of substances. Alcohol was the most harmful on this study, and psilocybin and LSD were in the bottom three, and of least risky. And David Nutt proposed that immediately anything safer than alcohol should be decriminalized. And I agree. And implying there's harm is kind of silly, right? Like the way I personally frame psilocybin mushrooms for myself is it's a sort of nootropic and vitamin, at the right dosing. So yeah, is there risk? Sure. Is there harm? Not necessarily. And by implying harm, we give regulators and people who might be opposed to our kind of project here, it gives them more ammo. So we have to be really careful with our language.
Great point.
Thanks for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I just wanted to add that, when we are talking about psilocybin or other psychedelics, harm can happen when you're mixing them with other things. So that is something that is, it depends. If you're talking about these medicines exclusively on their own, that's one thing. But when you're talking about them in conjunction with a lot of traditional Western approach, a lot of medications, then harm can happen.
Great.
And also maybe to mention that,
right? Oh. Go for it.
Sorry, I didn't mean to speak over you. I think there was a little glitch. Also to just be aware, we shouldn't end on this note, but just to to be aware that even, there are contraindications as well as also even amongst healthy individuals, there's this, I'm sure you're all aware of the topic of microdosing, particularly LSD, and some of the potential kind of heart valve issues that can develop for individuals if it's often frequent use, not necessarily dose dependent, but more connected to frequency of use. That's why microdosing is a concern. If it's often, again, Kellen Thomas, the really wonderful psychedelic psychopharmacologist has written about this and published on it. So they're just things that we need, again, not to take away from the point. I'm all for risk reduction, but also to know, just to, as sort of a PSA, that even healthy individuals can sometimes experience some negative consequences.
Great.
Yeah, and more research is required on that VHT thing. The heart valve issue is a big one, and we need a lot more research there so we can have some certainty of some kind.
Thank you. I also appreciate that point too.
Great. Perhaps we can end on this last question. There's two here, actually, Logan. Perhaps we can highlight both of them. Actually, sorry, let me just take one more quick one from Angela too, and then we'll circle back. Angela's just asking, I'm interested in getting involved in the education side of things. Where would you recommend I start as an operator, someone offering training in this space?
Take some trainings, probably taste around, read widely and take some trainings, I think, and probably go on a couple different types of retreats too, and see what speaks best to you and what you're trying to do. Great
point. All right. Stephanie's asking, how do we ensure that the sacred world of psychedelic assisted therapy doesn't get eaten up and perverted by the behemoth that is big pharma? And if we could also highlight this question, because I think it's variations on a theme. Kyle's asking something similar. Just curious about your opinions on how we manage the growth of the psychedelic industry without falling into the same capitalistic framework as the current pharma industry or even the current landscape of cannabis. A lot of cannabis brands are jumping into Amanita, for example, and other psychedelic products. I know that's a big question and probably kind of unfair to just toss at you at the very end, but any quick opinions you have on just, what you and maybe your organizations are doing to try to keep this space as, I guess, honorable and dedicated to the origins as possible, and try to maybe avoid that over pharmacization, if that's a word, of what could happen here.
Yeah, I think that that's really something that we try to focus on the Skylight, is really maintaining that ceremonial aspect and that ceremonial component of this work, and really, focusing on that these medicines, while they may act on various neurotransmitters and whatnot, their primary way that they work is connection with inner healing intelligence, and really just trying to keep moving forward the connection with the indigenous roots of these medicines and where they came from. And as long as you continue to do that, that's the fight against the consumption is happening, right? It's going to happen. You're going to see pape applicators in bodegas, like that is going to come, right? But it's our responsibility to keep moving forward with what we've learned, and really to put forth that information in our training and teaching our therapists and our community the importance of propagating where all of these come from and the whole spirit of what it is we're doing. Otherwise, the consumption is just gonna get us all. But it's that constant fight against that. That's what we are all doing.
I'd just like to jump in to say that, there are many capitalistic countries in Europe that don't have such a problematic healthcare system as we do here in the United States. And maybe the way that Fluence and my personal passion in terms of this topic is that when we work with the drug sponsors, our little way of kind of protecting this is to protect the integrity of the psychotherapy. In other words, protecting the integrity of the subjective experience. And that for some of one approach in terms of trying to scale accessibility and decrease cost is to maybe remove the psychedelic experience from the psychedelics, or maybe to remove the sort of interpersonal spiritual component of the experience and make it something where you're just sort of monitored for safety, rather than so when we work with these drug sponsors, we have a conversation with them and we understand what their values are, what are they trying to achieve, and making sure that we can, as best as we can, kind of protect that integrity.
Great point. Joe, anything to add there? I know it's a big topic, but
it's so complicated and it's nearly impossible to fight our way through this one, everybody. It's like trying to you're a freshwater fish and you're trying to reject all fresh water for salt water. It's hard. Like we're so embedded in this thing, so deeply colonized in this thing that it's hard to escape. So the best way to do it is kind of as the best integrity you can, showing up with the best integrity you can, and being careful who you take money from, because they can totally take over, and change your vision, and your thing might be used in a way that you didn't expect. We're really slow to accept money, and we haven't actually accepted money yet. So we're just really careful about who we want as partners, and I think that's a big one. And also, we at Psychedelics today are trying to radically support the underground, trying to support like all drug legalization and safe supply access, because ketamine's incredibly cheap. Psilocybin as such, maybe not biotech grade, is pretty cheap. Psilocybin's incredibly cheap. So these substances are available, and they're incredibly cheap. The thing that costs a lot of money is human time here, and that's the biggest cost. And so perhaps investigating alternative approaches. I helped get a number of priests excited a bunch of years ago. I noticed the Jewish Psychedelic Society was doing some really great work there. And I said, oh, let's get some more Christians excited too. And I think because of the kind of assets church groups have, there's a really great roadmap to community access there that doesn't have to be all the way spiritual or all the way clinical. It could be some sort of hybrid, leveraging maybe well-trained clergy or social workers in that context, and just exploring what's possible, and how do we just continue to scale access and make it really cheap.
Great point. And forgive me, we're going to sneak one more question in, then I promise we will wrap. Clint just has a good question. And Joe, you alluded to this earlier, so maybe we'll have you kick this off. He's asking, given that demand for psychedelic treatment will likely exceed the capacities for licensed professionals to meet that demand, do you think there should or will be opportunities for non-credentialed facilitators to operate under the supervision of a professional? Joe, do you want to take that one to start?
So yeah, for sure. I think the rules around ketamine-assisted psychotherapy are incredibly lax. So there's a lot of latitude there for what would look like what Clint's asking here, sort of a uncredentialed person doing the work, but having some sort of supervision. I think Colorado will have something like this. In Oregon, just the requirements are so low that I don't know that we're going to have such a bottleneck in Oregon. Because I think there's not enough facilities yet for the trained people, but that's coming. People are working on it. In Colorado, it's going to be really, really diverse. But yeah, like largely, this is a really big issue. So once MAPS is approved, and once Compass is approved, we're going to have a outrageously large need for trained people in those methodologies. Then as we see the expense of those protocols, we're going to see a corresponding increase in alternate routes of access. So I think there's just going to be shockingly large need for trained people. And we haven't done the research yet. I think MAPS had it in some of their kind of more private presentations with, all their projections for their work. But you stack this on with Compass and then all the other biotechs that might be right behind. It's going to be quite, the next decade here for training. Sure.
Great point. Ingmar, anything you want to add there?
Yeah, maybe a little piece of information. So the NIH put out its guideline. The FDA put out its guidelines for clinical trials in terms of who the two facilitators, what are their requirements. And so one facilitator in a pair doing this work has to be a licensed mental health professional. But the other one is required to have, I believe, a year's worth of experience in a mental health setting. It's a little bit more loosely defined, but that could mean somebody who's not necessarily licensed. And so that to me is... maybe a little bit of an opening. And of course, I know that we're referring to even use outside of a clinical context. And to Joe's point, I think that everything that Joe said, I agree with, that will be needed. But I just wanted to kind of even looking at the FDA, there's a little opening there.
Yeah, great. Dana, anything you want to add to end there?
No, I think that they both made really great points. I think it's an important question. Obviously, there is going to be a huge need. And there are a lot of programs that, train people who don't have these backgrounds and a lot of people who aren't trained licensed therapists can really hold space for someone and do amazing work.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Super. Well, again, huge thanks to all of our panelists, Dana, Joe, Ingmar. Thanks for your time. Thanks for really helping highlight the diversity of the various programs being offered. And I encourage all of you to become more familiar with each of their organizations for sure. Skylight Psychedelics, Psychedelics Today, and Fluence. And also hope to see at least some of you in Las Vegas at the Remind event. It's going to be fantastic. Thanks again to Christian, Sarah, and everybody that's been helping out behind the scenes. Logan, too. Appreciate you. And look forward to another webinar soon, hopefully. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all.